Hi there, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Hello, It's Best to Talk. And today I am so thrilled to be talking with Hazel Prior, who's the author of a book called Away with the Penguins, which was a Richard and Judy choice. It's been a wonderful bestseller. And in fact, my younger daughter, Lily, was the person who recommended Away with the Penguins for me. Who's 23, and one of her best friends at uni had read this book and really loved it and said it was a great read. So I read the book, Hazel, before I've met you as a person, and it is a great read. It took me a little while to kind of get into because there's a very interesting main character, Veronica McCreedy, who I'm sure you're going to tell us a bit more about, but she's in her 80s. So that's unusual in itself. But it's about, for me, it's about freedom and adventure and what we do at this phase in our lives. I'm now in my 60s. It's not quite as old as Veronica, but I feel like I'm entering this different phase. So what do we do? How do we live our lives the way we want them to be? And then it's also about connection and family and what's really important in life and your values. And so yeah, it's a lovely book, thoroughly recommended. Let's talk. So let's talk. Hazel, how did you get the inspiration for this book? Because it felt to me like a sort of brave bit of writing. You were entering into territory that hadn't really been written about before.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I was a little bit surprised myself that I came out with this book because it's quite different from my debut novel. My debut novel, I'll just quickly flash it up here. My debut novel is Ellie and the Harp Maker, which was a little bit more based in my own experience. I'm not like any of the characters in it, but that's sort of a lyrical story that's set on Exmoor, where I live. And is obviously slightly to do with harps, although in a broader sense, because I play the harp, but that was my inspiration for that one, and Pursuing Dreams. But I had a 2-book deal with Penguin Random House. So I then had to suddenly write another book. I thought, oh no, what on earth am I going to write about here? But being Penguin, I suddenly thought, oh, maybe I could do something about penguins.
See what you're doing there, penguins.
So the first inspiration was actually the little bird, although it's kind of, it is and it isn't about penguins. So there's also sort of underlying themes to do with our environmental issues and green issues. And that's something that, again, wasn't in my head when I started, but when I started to research penguins, that sort of became part of the book. And as you say, all these other themes. But again, I think with books, it's often an organic process. It's not something you kind of set out to do. It's just something that evolves as you go along. Mm. So I had this idea about penguins, and my other idea was to write something with an older heroine, because I've been really inspired by a lot of older people who I'd met recently, people in their 80s, 90s, and even 100-year-olds. So I go sometimes with my harp into care homes and play harp for older people. And a lot of the residents there had really inspired me with their stories. So for part of my research, I went and asked them about their wartime experiences. And a lot of them were so brimming with life and adventure. And then another, again, this relates back to the harp, because there was an old lady who came up to me and said, oh, will you teach me the harp? She wasn't somebody in the care home. She was living on her own. And she said, oh, I'm 90 this year. Is it going to be a problem? And I said, well, how's your finger flexibility? And she said, not bad. So she came and had a little try out on the harp. And I ended up teaching her harp as a complete beginner. So I thought, oh, wow, I love this attitude of it's never too late. And, you know, you can still keep learning things no matter how old we are. And I thought, there need to be more books that give us hope for the future like that as we get older, because our society is so blooming negative about aging, and we just tend to see it as this gloom and doom thing that we're heading for. And I wanted to write a novel that would give us a bit more hope for the future, about somebody who maybe had bad things happening in her past, but then as an older person suddenly had great things happening. So there were these two ideas, that completely conflicting ideas. I thought, how can I put together a colony of penguins and a really old lady? And the two ideas somehow meshed together and created this novel.
How wonderful! How wonderful! And I love the fact you're also wearing a penguin scarf as well.
Oh
So
yes,
you're
yeah.
this is definitely
Subtle
team penguin.
advertising there, well, not so subtle.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So it's kind of like inspired by the life stories of people that you met, and so that so
I
Veronica,
should tell you as well. Can I just tell you as well? I have. It wasn't just the publisher Penguin that put the idea of penguins into my head. I also have a very dear friend who is madly into penguins, and she has a bit of a tragic story of her own. Well, sort of tragic, but with a happy elements. And she, I got to know her many years ago, and her husband as well. And her husband suddenly died of a heart attack, and she was just a bit, about my own age. So it was really, really sad for her.
so
But she is an incredibly strong person, and she had worked in areas of resilience and had decided that she needed to set herself a goal of doing something she really enjoyed and found was fulfilling. And she decided, being madly obsessed with penguins, that she would go and travel around the world and take photos of penguins in their natural environment. Wow. So she wasn't short of money. She had plenty of that going on. And so she did this, and she's been to all the penguin populated countries and taken the most fabulous photographs of penguins in their natural environment. And it has, you can't look at a penguin without smiling. They are just the most funny, cute, uplifting creatures. And also they sort of have their own lessons about resilience, because of course they live in these really harsh conditions. So, we can kind of see a lot of inspiration from penguins. So she kind of got all this inspiration and this kind of healing in a way from her penguin adventures. So that also put the idea of healing through penguins into my head, and the idea of penguins as a kind of model of resilience, really, and survival against the odds. So although her story is completely different from the story of my main character, the idea of redemption through penguins came from her.
That's wonderful. This is kind of, I've got goosebumps actually as well, because I mean, penguins are a theme in our family, in that Happy Feet is my younger daughter Lily's favorite film. And quite separately, we had a litter of golden cocker spaniel puppies in lovely. January, and two of them were named after the main characters in Happy Feet. So we had Mumble and Gloria. But I think that film also is something which is very life-affirming, and the importance of self-acceptance and going with what you do well, rather than going along with the gang who might do something completely different. So yeah, and you're quite right. Penguins just make you smile so much, don't they? They're just the most joyous little beings.
Yes. And we kind of, because they look a little bit like tiny waddly humans, you can't help kind of seeing the little, I mean, they do have human traits, and they also have traits that are entirely penguin and mysterious, which we don't understand at all. And they have this whole life under the water, which we know very little about, as well as, they're waddling about on land. But, they just are wonderful in so many ways. And I wasn't particularly, everyone likes penguins. I wasn't particularly a penguin person before I wrote this book, but the more I started to research them and study them, the more I thought, oh my goodness, they are incredible. We have so much to learn from penguins. And the fact as well that they, one of the things that Veronica learns from them is that they work as a colony, they're totally interdependent. They need each other and they work together. So
Hazel, I think you've
with the human race.
Yes.
However, the penguins sort of teach her cooperation in a way, and teach her that it's okay to trust other people and to work with other people, or other members of your species, shall we say?
Yes. Which and trust for her is a commodity that's not in any great. But she doesn't have trust in other people.
It's a very key issue for her for very big reasons. Yeah.
And trust is such a huge issue for us, I think, for as living the human experience, and how we do trust. And babies have to trust their their parents or their primary carers completely, because they rely on them totally for their life and for survival. But as we get into being adults, then we have to differentiate between the sort of people that we can trust and the people that we can't trust. And it always feels to me like one of the key important things is it's not what people say they're going to do, it's what people actually do that we need to base our trust on. And I think that's another lovely theme in your book, that it's the people around Veronica that she hasn't really necessarily she doesn't even really treasure that much, although she learns to.
She has a big lesson to learn.
She has huge lessons, doesn't she? But those people stay committed to her and committed to her well-being eventually. So I'm thinking about Eileen, and then later on the member of the family that she meets, but that they do things which help her. It's not what they say necessarily, but actually the way they live their lives, and that their actions and their behavior turns out to mean that actually these are people that she can trust. And so that sort of breaking of her heart and then opening up and connecting. So many beautiful themes in this book. Tell me, there's also a kind of underlying theme almost for me about dementia, and about with old age, where you start being forgetful, and what's that about, and how do you manage that?
Yes, well, she it's not something I go into in any depth, but she is in her early 80s, actually no, mid 80s, going on to, she's 85 when the book begins, and 86 as she's out in Antarctica, and
I love that. I just got to, as she's out in Antarctica. That's such a fantastic line.
Sounds very unlikely, doesn't it? Well, it is quite a far-fetched story, I'll admit, but she is a very feisty and very fit 85/86-year-old. But yeah, she does have some memory problems, and a few things slip. And one of the reasons for that is because she's been isolated so long. She just, as you say, she has this wonderful housekeeper called Eileen who helps her, with daily life, helps her remember what she has to remember. But obviously then she's kind of quite determined that she can do things on her own, and she's in denial about a lot of things, is Veronica. But fortunately, there's always somebody there who will catch her and set her on the straight and narrow again. And she's very vulnerable, but also very strong. And you've kind of got those two sides of her character. But yeah, the dementia, I didn't want to go into in too much depth. I've had a lot of problems in my own life. Both my parents had dementia, and it's something that I touch on quite a lot in the first book. But again, I had so many other things going on in this book, so I just kind of touched on it. And people will see it there and see it as a light thing that and just say, okay, that's there. Or possibly think about it more deeply. But I think that's more something that's subtly interwoven, which I hope readers will interpret their own way and think about it and dwell on it if they want to. But if that's too painful, then just leave it and concentrate on the other elements of the story.
Yeah, no, very much. I felt it was a light touch, but it was nice that it was there, because that felt very real as well. And both of my parents had dementia too, so
yes,
it's a challenge for looking at it in different aspects. But it's a terrific read. I really want to kind of acknowledge you for that, Hazel, because it just takes you to another place. I mean, it takes you to Antarctica, and that wonderful whiteness, the sort of all the different shades of white as well. So that's another wonderful theme. So did you go to Antarctica when you were writing the book, or how did you find? What did you do to research that?
I didn't know. I would have loved to have gone to Antarctica, but I sort of couldn't possibly afford it, because it's very, very expensive to go, incredibly expensive to go. And also I kind of have this thing about, I've writing about environmental themes, and I sort of feel that Antarctica isn't a place for tourism. It's one of those sacred places where I think, unless you have a very, very good reason to go, it's probably better to leave it for the penguins and the wildlife, because humans have dominated and spoilt so much of this planet that an extra bit of travel. For me, it wasn't really strictly necessary. So I thought, no. But I did an awful lot of research. So one of the things was there's a website called the British Antarctic Surveys website, which is run by the coalition that owns Antarctica. Well, nobody owns Antarctica, but in our human way, we might define it like that. And they have a lot of scientists who are studying penguins out there, and they write blogs. So as you'll be aware, there are quite a lot of blogs in the book written by one of the scientists who's studying penguins. So I got a lot of information from there to try and make it authentic, from people who've been studying penguins, and also from my friend, obviously, who had been to Antarctica and taken photos of penguins there. But it's interesting because scientists do study the fluctuations in penguin colonies for very, very good reasons, because they are indicative of climate change in a big way. And of course, with the ice melt, the first creatures to suffer will be the penguins. So the fluctuations in the numbers of their colonies tell us an awful lot about the ecosystem generally. So it's really important scientific work that they're doing there. So I studied that quite a lot. My friend and her photographs. I went to see real penguins myself. I didn't have to go to Antarctica. I went to Torquay actually to do that. So I went to a sea life centre in Torquay, and I spoke to the keepers there who had hand reared a baby penguin. So as you know, there's a little bit about rearing an orphaned penguin in the book. So they were able to fill me in on a lot of information there. And I met a lovely penguin who had been hand reared, who I got to know quite well. His name was Yo-Yo. And I spent a lot of time observing penguins, both there and obviously what fun research it was, to be watching penguins on YouTube, loads and loads and loads, and call it work. So that was just great research. Yeah, it was great. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much, Hazel, for this. It's just, I think this book just takes you to another place. I can well understand why it's been so popular. And you've written a follow-up book to it now?
I have, yes. I'll finish that for you as well. So this is Call of the Penguins. So that just came out last year. Yes, that way. Last year. And if for any Veronica fans, it's Veronica who thinks that her days of adventure are over, having had that one big final thing, a major thing. She then gets another opportunity to go on a filming expedition, doing some wildlife documentary filming. So she gets to travel again and see penguins again. And there's various things that come up in that story as well. So if you enjoyed Away with the Penguins, you might enjoy that one too.
Great. So Hazel, actually, just before you go, I know there'll be people who'll be watching this who are on their own writing journey, and it's always lovely to know what a writer's routine is, and if you've got any tips about writing. So this is a kind of bit of a curveball for you right at the end, but I just, it sounds like what you do is you follow your curiosity and you really kind of dig deep in that and what excites you, which I think is a lovely way about the way in which you work, because that excitement and curiosity really feed into the page. But are there any tips that you would have for budding writers to be?
That is the key thing. I think write what you really, really want to write about. Don't try and follow any trends or try and fit into any markets or anything like that, because it won't come across. Don't feel that you have to.
Hazel, so the last little bit, just that you froze. So
did I freeze? Sorry. Sorry. I was just saying, if you have a wild and wacky imagination, that's fine. Go with that. Don't be afraid to express it. And don't feel that you have to write about things that you've been through yourself, because with Away with the Penguins, as you know, I hadn't been to Antarctica. I knew nothing about penguins really when I started. I'm not an 86-year-old woman or a 27-year-old man. It's written from their points of view. So just make it up. You're allowed, just use your imagination and enjoy it, I think, is the key thing as well. Yeah, it's really important that you enjoy it.
That's lovely advice. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you next week at the Ilminster Book Festival.
Me too.
Yeah, we're both going to be there in a panel, the Ilminster Literary Festival, 10:30 on Monday. So
Monday morning.
Looking forward to that very much, and meeting you in person. And in the meantime, thank you so much for this lovely interview.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely. Thank you.
Taking us off to Antarctica with the penguins. How wonderful. So thanks very much, everybody, for watching this. Please click the subscribe button. We'd love to have you along on this journey about talking about all sorts of things that need talking about, because it is better to talk. So love and light to you all, and many thanks. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.